and welcome to another episode of Choms Talks. I'm Choms, and this is Choms Talks, of course, where everybody has an opinion just like buttholes. Only difference is I like to share my opinions. So please follow, like, subscribe, and leave your comments down below. Today, we are going to be talking about the very heated Republican primary race in the Kentucky 4th District. Thomas Massie is hoping to be reelected, and honestly, I fully support him and hope he gets reelected. I do not live in his district, or I would totally be casting my vote for him. However, I do want to make a video because I really, really think the Republican Party cannot afford to lose a man like Thomas Massie. And that's what I want to talk about today. Why, in my opinion, in my beliefs, I believe the Republican Party, it would be a disservice to the Republican Party to lose Thomas Massie and have his congressional seat go to his opponent. So if you live in one of these counties that make up the 4th District of Kentucky, please go out and vote. Your vote does matter. So Thomas Massie is the U.S. representative. He entered Congress in November of 2012 after serving as Lewis County Judge Executive. He does represent the Kentucky's 4th Congressional District, which stretches across northern Kentucky and 261 miles of the Ohio River. If you go to his page, massey.house.gov, you can see here that he has a U.S. debt clock. Our U.S. debt is almost at $39 trillion. That is a huge amount of money. One of the big things that he stands on in his beliefs, his policies, is not increasing our debt. We're going to get into that. But he has it posted here for everyone to see. It tracks even on the weekends. Today is Sunday, May 17th. When I'm recording this, it's tracking even when the U.S. Treasury is closed. You can see it continuing to climb as I'm recording the video. So that's very important to know, because who wants to see our debt continue to climb? Who wants to continue to see us spending money overseas when we could be spending that money here at home? That is one of the things he has consistently voted against. Let's get into it. All right. So first thing I want to talk about is he's always been against the U.S., been against voting for spending U.S. dollars overseas. And here is him on the Tucker Carlson show 2 years ago. Let's watch a little bit of this.
Are we in a war with Russia? I've never figured that out. Why Russia? It almost seems like they picked it off a map. Like, why would we be at war with Russia?
You know what's interesting is we were in Afghanistan and I was tracking this. I talked to the Special Inspector General, John Sopko, about twice a year about the money that was being wasted in Afghanistan. It was about $50 billion a year. And I was glad to see us get out of Afghanistan, but kind of like feathering the clutch and shifting gears, we just went from second gear to third gear, because as soon as we quit spending $50 billion a year in Afghanistan, we started spending more than $50 billion a year in Ukraine. There's a military industrial complex. They call it the defense industrial base now in the United States. They say they're hungry and we got to keep them fed. And since we don't have any of our own wars and we don't have a reason to deplete our stocks and our bombs and weapons that we have, we'll engage in these other things to keep them healthy and thriving. In fact, the Biden administration even made that argument in a letter to Congress for why we should do this supplemental foreign aid to Israel, to Ukraine, to Taiwan. They made the argument that the defense industrial base needs to be strong, and so we need to spend this money. And they gave a list of all the states in the United States that would benefit from this spending, and that's why they said we should do it.
But look, everyone who lives here wants to be proud of the country. I always have been. And I'm proud of its people still. But if your main export is death, what?
It doesn't work in the long run. I mean, there is
What's also
blowback.
just wrong.
we're engendering a lot of ill will. Look, 10 years ago, even more recently than that, the only way we could get to the space station was on a Russian rocket.
Right.
And we had a collaboration with them. We were able to get to space that way. And now we don't. I mean, and the bad thing that's, like in the Middle East, Israel's creating tens of thousands or hundreds of thousands of people who are going to hate the United States. And they're going to hate Israel also. But because we're giving Israel the weapons to do what they're doing, we're creating a lot of people who hate us in this country.
I mean, he's not wrong. Not wrong at all. Every time we supply weapons to another country, that country uses the weapons that we supplied against another country, and especially when they're not using it for defense. They're using it as an attack, such as the case with Israel. They're committing acts of genocide. Then not only are they creating enemies for themselves, they are creating enemies for us. So we are now the target of these other countries as well.
But we're told that it's essential to our national security to do that. Do you believe that?
No, I don't see that. I mean, one of the reasons, like I said, the Biden letter said, well, we need to keep our industrial base strong, so let's fund all these weapons and send them over. But I don't see how it's strengthening our country. In fact, we're getting weaker by doing it.
So you've been, I think, the lone Republican to dissent from a lot of these votes. How many votes have there been on this question, and where have you voted on them?
Oh, I've tried to keep track. There were something like 18 votes on Ukraine, and I voted against every one of them since like 2014 when we started, saber rattling. We do these non-binding resolutions, whereas, Russia's evil and, whereas we support democracy. Now, even then we knew that Ukraine was just corrupt as hell. But,
like the most corrupt country in Europe by far.
Yeah. So I started, there's been 16 or 20 votes on Ukraine. I've been against all of those. Just in the last 7 months, there have been probably 30 votes on Israel and the Middle East.
30?
30. There were somebody.
How many votes on the U.S. border during that time?
Oh, maybe 4 show votes that, where we know they're going nowhere in the Senate.
So more votes, 15 votes for Ukraine, 30 votes for Israel. And keep in mind, this was 2 years ago. And only 4 show votes. And they knew that it wasn't going to go anywhere in the Senate. For our own border protection. So they're getting more votes to send money to other countries than they are for our own country. Anybody else see a problem with that?
Look, we haven't named 30 post offices. Last month, we voted like 15 or 16 times on issues related to Israel. And, I've been hit because I voted no on all of those.
Why because you hate Israel, or is there another reason?
No, because I'm against sending our money overseas. I'm against starting another proxy war. I'm against sanctions because it's going to weaken the dollar. I'm for free speech. Like, all of these resolutions run afoul of those things, and that's why I can't vote for them.
Tell us what the free speech part of it.
So recently they brought a bill to Congress, and this was actually a binding bill, not a non-binding resolution. Like, this was going to have the effect of law, and people would get, prosecuted if they engaged in anti-Semitism on campuses. And the problem with this bill is they use some international definition of anti-Semitism on a website somewhere. My first question is, why don't you just put the definition in the bill? Why are you pointing to somebody's URL in a piece of legislation?
You are the Congress, right?
Right. We are the
Congress. Write the laws.
We should be. Instead, we're referencing a website that's not even, hosted in the United States. And so I went to this website, And it's got a fairly short definition, but it's also got examples of things that would be considered anti-Semitism. And some of these are actually passages in the New Testament, if you will, would be banned by this international definition of anti-Semitism. For instance, saying that Jews killed Jesus, which is, in the Bible. He was not welcome among his own people, okay? And so that would be anti-Semitism. And if you engaged in that on campus, or just offered that as a thought, let's say in a classroom, you would be anti-Semitic and you would run afoul of the Department of Education and some federal laws. And, there were other examples in there.
So I hope all you Christian followers listen to that. Clearly, if you are on campus and you say that Jews killed Jesus, which is in the Bible, if you say Jews killed Jesus, then you are considered an anti-Semite and you could be prosecuted. Make that make sense. You're literally speaking what's in the Bible. Whether another religion agrees with you or not, that is your religion. Are they going to prosecute Jews for their religious beliefs? Are they going to prosecute Muslims for their religious beliefs? For speaking their religious beliefs? No. Only prosecuting Christians for speaking their religious beliefs. A facet of their religious beliefs. How does that make you an anti-Semite just because you're speaking part of your religious belief? It's in the Bible that Jesus was not welcome by his own people, that his own people are the ones who did what they did to him. It doesn't make you an anti-Semite. You're not saying that you hate Jews. You're just expressing your beliefs of what you believe to be from the Bible.
There that were hard to believe. For instance, comparing the policies of Israel to the Nazi regime would be anti-Semitic. But the question is, what if their policies ever became the same? Is this a static definition?
Or what if we just have different opinions and your opinion is now a crime?
Right. I mean even if it's abhorrent.
Even if it's wrong and stupid.
Yeah. It's still legal. It should be.
You may have come to the obvious conclusion that the real debate is not between Republican and
it should be. You should be able to have your beliefs regardless of how stupid it is. Free speech entitles you to say what you want. That is our constitutional right. Say what you want. It shouldn't be illegal to just say what you want, regardless of how, to use Thomas Massie's own words, abhorrent it is. Whether we agree with it or not, that should not be a crime. Should not be a crime for you to speak your mind.
Democrat or socialist and capitalist.
Something very simple and benign, and for them, they don't really grade your term paper. They just want to know that you'll do something for them, and if you'll do something for them as a candidate, you're more likely to do something for them as a congressman when you get in there. So my rift started out in 2012 when I refused to turn in an Israel term paper.
And how did they respond to that?
Well, they kind of got in my race a little too late there in the beginning, and because it was hard to tell that I was actually going to win. And when they saw I was going to win, that's when they tried to get me to do the term paper. They didn't have a political action committee at the time. They couldn't spend hundreds of thousands or millions of dollars against me at that time. It was just sort of like a whisper campaign to try to, hey, don't vote for him, blah, blah, blah.
That's why.
Because at that point, they sensed I wouldn't do what they wanted when I got to
what did they whisper against you? What were they saying about you?
Well, they would do it through, for instance, churches, evangelical churches. They've got an organization called Christians United for Israel, where they've sort of co-opted evangelicals. People think it's a grassroots movement in Kentucky. It's actually a top-down movement from AIPAC, so that people who aren't even Jewish will feel like they've got to support Israel, no matter what. And even if it's a secular state that funds abortions, they, just sort of forget that part, and we've got to fund Israel. So
I'm not even going to mention my thoughts when it comes, excuse me, when it comes to churches' involvement in government. I think there should be a strict line between a separation of church and state. So the fact that he says that they were getting evangelical churches involved and everything, and we see it happening all the time, but that's really troublesome to me.
They have networks, so it's more than just about the money.
So you get elected, despite their efforts, and then what happens? Do you talk to them after that? And
by the way, let me just put a little footnote here. I'm not against Israel. I've never voted to sanction Israel. I've never said anything particularly, critical of Israel, other than, for instance, right now they're bombing. They've killed 1% of the civilian population in Gaza. That's concerning to me. But so what do they do now?
You get elected 2012. Do you hear from them again?
I vote my conscience, which they won't tolerate. So they ran with their 501c4 before they had a super PAC. They were running educational advocacy ads against me, saying that I'm bad on Israel. They didn't say don't vote for him. They just said he's a bad guy. And so I said, all right, well, you're not welcome in my office anymore, because for years I invited them into my office. Let's talk this through. Let me explain to you. I'm a libertarian leaning Republican. I don't vote for foreign aid for anybody. So don't be offended when I don't vote for your foreign aid. I don't vote for wars anywhere. So don't be offended if I do that. I'm for free speech, even if it's abhorrent. And we used to talk, but now they're banned from my office. The situation went from bad to worse. This election cycle, they spent.
And I'm going to stop it there. I think that's a good stopping point. He lays out his policies and what he believes in clearly, and they don't like him just because of that. He's for free speech, regardless of how abhorrent the free speech is. Completely free speech. It's our constitutionally given rights. He's not for foreign aid for any country. That includes Israel. Great. Neither am I. I don't want our tax dollars being sent to every country out there. I don't want our tax dollars being sent to any country when we have people at home, our veterans at home, that still need to be taken care of. He's not for foreign wars. Great. Neither am I. I don't want us being puppets for somebody else's wars. I don't want to be in no proxy wars. I don't want to be in none of these endless wars over and over again. It's ridiculous. Keep our troops at home. Don't be supplying bombs and weapons and all of this stuff to all of these other militaries and countries. No, we don't need to be involved in everybody else's war all the time. Okay. And this is Thomas Massie, just a couple of weeks ago, back again on the Tucker Carlson show. So let's hear what he has to say this time.
In his own words. Thomas Massie, thank you for doing this. You've got a primary in less than 2 weeks, 13 days. And so to take the time to come here, we're grateful for it. It seems like this primary is more than a primary. It's a window into what MAGA has become, and it's a referendum, I would argue, on democracy itself. And so just to frame the conversation around that idea, what was your margin of victory in the last race in Kentucky?
In the last race, primary, I got 75% of the vote. There was somebody that got 13% and somebody that got 12%.
75% of the vote.
And in the race before that, I got 76%. And then the race before that, I got 81%.
81%. Now, the race you get 81%, you were already having conflict with Trump at the time, right?
Yeah. At the time, he was saying to throw me out of the party. He called me a third-rate grandstander. to which I claim I'm at least second rate.
Fair. So I'm going through this because I think it leads to today, and it makes a really interesting point. So what is the current polling in your race?
It's a single point lead for me. It's not very fluid. They've spent
Single point lead. And that is why it is so important that every Kentuckian in the 4th district get out and vote. He needs the votes.
$10 million against me. And when I say they, I hope we get into they.
Yes.
And it's going to be close. It's just going to be, the result is going to be based on who turns out.
So it was 81% margin, 76, 75, like full-on blowouts in the Republican primary in your district in Kentucky, and now it's within a couple of points and you could lose.
Correct.
And the difference is they have spent $10 million against you. So I don't think anyone would dispute that. That's the difference. The money poured into this race from
The difference is the money. $10 million going to his opponent. $10 million going to his opponent. Do you think it came from Kentuckians? I can pretty much guarantee you it did not.
from outside of Kentucky is basically pushing you to the point of almost losing, and you may lose. Where'd that money come from?
Well, it didn't come from regular people. It's come from billionaires, and 95% of it, at least 95%, has come from the Israeli lobby. So I'll give you their proxies. The RJC, which is the Republican Jewish Coalition, AIPAC, the American Israel Public Affairs Committee, Miriam Adelson, Paul Singer, and John Paulson went together. They funded a PAC called MAGA Kentucky, which is neither MAGA nor Kentucky. But when the ad
Any of
runs,
them live? Who are those three people?
they have been, Miriam Adelson is the gambling magnate who's
Right.
ironically makes money from the Chinese now gambling and not in Las Vegas
And
so
she's
much.
literally an Israeli.
Yeah, she was born there.
Yep.
She's given over $200 million to the president. He puts her on the stage. He says that she's influenced his own policy and attitudes toward Israel. And so she's trying to buy a congressional seat.
I'm sure she has influenced his policy and his attitude towards Israel. She's given him over $200 million. $200 million is a lot of money to buy anybody's attitude and policy. Just saying.
In Kentucky, along with the rest of these groups that are probably, by the way, getting her money as well. And there's also another interesting faction called Christians United for Israel. They're really just another wing of AIPAC and RJC that's been used to co-opt Christians into supporting their position. And their position is more war, it's more strife, it's more bombs, it's send more foreign aid. And those are the things that I've been voting against. So the real reason that this race is a serious race and I may lose is because a foreign lobby has fully funded to the extent that they've never done in any Republican race ever before my opponent.
It's interesting because I don't think of you as an opponent of Israel or a hater of Jews, an anti-Semite, a man with hate in his heart, or anything. I don't think those topics have defined your terms in Congress so far, have they?
No, you can't go find even a xenophobic tweet or Facebook post from me in my entire life. I'm the least xenophobic. I went to MIT, which is a real melting pot of different nationalities and races and ethnicities. And it was a meritocracy. And that's what I'm used to is just, come to me with your ideas. I don't care what color your skin is or who your parents were. And let's talk about things. But it turns out that I've never voted for foreign aid. And in fact,
For Israel?
For Israel, for Egypt, for Ukraine.
For anybody?
For anybody. In fact, I've offered amendments as soon
Never voted for foreign aid for anybody. So it's not just Israel. It's for everybody.
as I got to Congress in 2013. I had an amendment to defund the foreign aid to Egypt, which seemed like a good idea at the time because they were in the middle of a coup. This is how ridiculous our foreign aid is. We didn't even know who was going to control the Capitol. There were tanks in the streets, We didn't know who the leader was. And my colleagues insisted on sending the billions of dollars to Egypt anyway. The question is, who's going to cash the check when it gets there? So I've got a complete track record of voting against all foreign aid.
To his point, why would we want to send our money to Egypt when we don't know who's going to be the ones to cash the check? We don't know which side of the government's going to win. That's scary to think about, that was going to happen. Yeah. That's worrisome. And he's also not wrong. He does have a complete track record of voting against all foreign aid. You can actually go on his social medias, his website. He posts every time he votes against a bill. He posts it and he tells you why he votes against it. What is in that bill that makes him vote against it?
But it turns out there's one lobby that's very upset about that, and that's the Israeli lobby. And so you're right, this is a referendum. It's a referendum. The question we're putting to the people is, are you going to let a foreign country or lobbyists for that foreign country buy a seat in Kentucky?
It's a really good question to ask to the Kentucky people. Are you going to let a foreign entity, or at the very least lobbyists for the foreign government, buy a congressional seat for our state? And really it's not just our state that it happens in, it's every state, we know that. But as Kentuckians, we are the ones who are supposed to be the pull yourself up by the bootstraps. We take care of ourselves. We're the ones who are supposed to be looking out for the red, white, and blue, wanting to take care of our neighbors first, America first. And do we really want to have foreign interest groups, a foreign country, buying our Kentucky congressional seat? Just a question for thought, but that's really what you need to be thinking about. Thomas Massie also did ask for more transparency in foreign interest lobbying on Capitol Hill. So let's watch this.
Today, I introduced a bill called the APAC Act. You'll see this come up. Nobody knows this. I'm debuting it on your show right now, which would make APAC subject to Foreign Agent Registrations Act. For some reason, they're immune right now. And I think not just the money that's spent in politics, but the lobbying that happens on Capitol Hill should be reported if it's a foreign country, whether it's Great Britain, Australia, Turkey, Qatar, or Israel. It needs to be reported.
And the amount of money that goes to these influencers, it's really interesting. You'll see them sort of all, publishing the same attacks online almost simultaneously, or they'll release videos. They're all on the same page, and it's like they're receiving talking points. They should have to disclose that they're receiving this money, right?
Yeah, when I do a commercial, and I've said this so many times, when my sleep, I think about it. I'm Thomas Massie, and I approve this message. I'm Thomas Massie, and I approve this message. That's either at the front or the end of every commercial I do. And when I send out a piece of mail, it says who did it, and my campaign, Thomas Massie for Congress, approved by Thomas Massie for Congress, paid by. And we need that. I believe we should have that same sort of truth in advertising on social media, because if it's a good idea in the other outlets, it would be a good idea on social media, particularly because so much of it is foreign money. I remember all of these complaints about election interference, fraudulent elections, and the Russians being involved, and who else being involved. But really, the elections are being influenced online.
He's right. He's absolutely right. Remember when Trump was running for his first term, I believe it was, and somebody correct me in the comments if I'm wrong. Excuse me. Please correct me in the comments if I'm wrong. But I do believe it was Trump's first term. Russia, it was all about Russia was involved in our elections. Russia was involved in our elections. And not to say that Russia wasn't involved. We have proof that there was a lot of Russian bots and everything involved all over social media. But now, why would you want Israel or Europe or anybody involved in our elections? Shouldn't our elections be for us? Why do we want another government paying an influencer and telling you who to vote for? Why do we want another government spreading lies about our politicians? The lies that a lot of people are likely to believe. It's just something to think about. I do think there should be truth and transparency when there is a foreign interest lobbying, paying people, or putting money into campaigns. Absolutely, I 100% support this. All right, so let's talk about some of his policies and some things that he supports besides the foreign interest lobbying. One of the things that he does believe is our government refuses to investigate the Epstein files because of Kash Patel. He doesn't believe that as long as Kash Patel is the head of the FBI, so the FBI director, that the Epstein files will ever be investigated, and anybody, the clients, the co-conspirators, nobody will ever face prosecution. So let's take a listen to this.
I don't think Kash Patel can be the FBI director and anything ever happened with these Epstein files, because he testified in the Senate that Jeffrey Epstein acted alone. Even Melania Trump does not believe that. And then the next day, he came to the House Judiciary Committee where I asked him to double down. And he said there's no evidence in these files that anybody was a co-conspirator with Jeffrey Epstein other than Ghislaine Maxwell. He's perjured himself in the Senate and the House. His only defense is to say, well, when I told you that, I didn't really know what was in the files, or the people working for me misled me. That's why I think you will never get to the bottom of this as long as he's FBI director.
And it's something to totally think about.
I don't think Kash Patel can be...
Absolutely something to totally think about. We all want the Epstein files released. Except for those who are mentioned in the files, obviously. And why are they not releasing those? Why is nobody being prosecuted besides Maxwell? Well, Kash Patel has perjured himself twice. And we all knew there was co-conspirators. We all knew that Epstein did not act alone. So what on earth would cause him to say that in the first place? Why would he have said that in the first place? I can't fathom what would have made him say that. Cannot fathom what would have made him say that. Here's another clip I was watching, and I wanted to share this with you.
Joining us now to discuss all of this is Congressman Thomas Massie. He's been obviously one of the leaders in Congress trying to get the Epstein files released, trying to bring justice to the victims, to the survivors of this. Congressman, thank you very much for joining us today.
Hey, thanks for having me on.
It's a pleasure to see you again. Thank you. I want to talk to you about the Epstein files. You obviously have been pushing really hard to get these released. In fact, you just congratulated the new Attorney General, Todd Blanche, for becoming Attorney General. And then you let him know that if he had not released these files within the next 30 days, he would be criminally liable. I take it you don't think the DOJ is complying with the law?
No, they're not. And I'm afraid not much is going to change. Todd Blanche has been doing the work for Pam Bondi all along. In fact, he's been going on TV and answering the questions. The only time she appeared to answer any questions was in front of our Judiciary Committee, and she just basically filibustered and called names. That didn't work out for her, but Todd Blanche has been responsible the entire time. Right now, he's going to be accountable because the Epstein Files Transparency Act says it is the Attorney General, not the Deputy Attorney General, who's responsible for producing these documents.
What do you suppose they're hiding, Congressman? I mean, I know you guys have some access to the documents that others don't. What is it that they are so afraid of releasing?
Well, before I get the motive of what they're hiding, let me talk about the things that we know are missing. and the things that they are intentionally keeping from us. First of all, when we go over to look at the unredacted files, there's some of the files that have redactions on them that even the DOJ says they can't remove because they received the files in that redacted form as hard copies. Well, the reality is the Epstein Files Transparency Act directs the Attorney General to put those files out on a database that's publicly searchable, but it also compels the FBI and the U.S. Attorney Generals to give that information to the DOJ. So what the DOJ needs to do is go back to the FBI and the U.S. Attorneys General and get those things unredacted so that we can look at them. So that's the first category of things that are missing. There's another category of things. These are files that they put up on their website. We know they exist, but then they pulled them back down. And so when I went over to the DOJ, and I've been there 3 times, I couldn't find these files. Ostensibly, they removed these files to protect the survivors and the victims of Jeffrey Epstein and his associates. And we thought they would redact them and put them back up online, but they haven't. So they need to put those back online, and we need to be able to look at what they've redacted. There's another category of things that they haven't released, and these are the 302 forms. This would be the summaries of interviews that the FBI completes and keeps on record after they talk to witnesses and victims. Well, we talk to survivors who say they still haven't seen their 302 summaries online, so we know that's missing. And then finally, this is the most troubling category of things that are missing that they need to produce. And that is their internal memos and emails at the DOJ and the FBI and among the U.S. Attorneys General, U.S. attorneys that say things about their decisions of whether to prosecute or not, or whether to investigate or not. They are claiming
So many files are missing. Where are all the files?
deliberative privilege. So if you were to do a Freedom of Information Act of the government, any of the branches, they would tell you, well, the rules say that we only have to give you the final work product. We don't have to show you our math and how we got to that answer. But that applies to Freedom of Information Act, not the Epstein Files Transparency Act. And the Epstein Files Transparency Act postdates their rules, which means it trumps their rules, which means they have a new set of rules. And the Epstein Files Transparency Act specifically, I gave that one too many syllables, specifically says that they have to release memos and emails about their decisions.
Yeah, it's very troubling, Congressman. And of course, I've spent a lot of time going through these documents. We've been doing this series for Behind the Deep State. And one of the things that is glaringly obvious is that there's a lot of names of Epstein associates that have been redacted. And incidentally, there have been names of victims that have been released. My understanding of the statute that you guys passed, that the president signed into law, is that they were not supposed to be covering up for associates and possible co-conspirators. How concerned are you and other members of Congress that some of the people who helped Jeffrey Epstein, some of the people who worked with him, are not being publicly identified yet?
Well, this is my opinion, and I'm covered by speech or debate clause of the Constitution, so I can say this without recrimination. But I believe there's enough evidence in there, even among the redacted files, to start investigations on Leon Black, Jess Staley, and Leslie Wexner. In fact, Leslie Wexner was listed on the FBI's own documents as a co-conspirator in a underage sex trafficking case. Now, this gets to that last point I made, which was, show us your decision. How did you go from deciding that Leslie Wexner was a co-conspirator to not even talking to him? What was the evidence that you found that exonerated him from any suspicion? They haven't given us those documents. In fact, until I challenged them online in a social media post, they had redacted the fact that Leslie Wexner's name was on that list of co-conspirators of Jeffrey Epstein. Basically, through public pressure, I forced them to release the redaction, to unredact that file and show that he was, at least at one time, considered a co-conspirator in this case. And there are many others that we could find if they would release those 302 forms.
And why are those 3 people that he named, why are they not being investigated? He believes that there's enough evidence from the files themselves for them to be investigated as co-conspirators. So why is the FBI not investigating them? That's the problem with this country, is because they have money, because they have power, I believe that they will never be investigated. Just my beliefs. So Representative Massie also stood against when the Republicans tried to use a unanimous consent to pass a 45-day extension to warrantless spying on Americans without voting. He, of course, did not consent. He also was able to force a vote and a debate. He used rare parliamentary procedure to control half the time. You can go and you can watch the full debate. It's a really great debate. It does go into how the FBI is using warrantless spying on its own American citizens. They're going around and spying on us without getting a warrant. That's scary to think about. Very scary to think about. You can, and they're doing it with block cameras. They're doing it with really anything technology based. So think about it. If, let's say, I'm sitting in my home and I'm just gonna put my tinfoil hat on here, okay? I have an Alexa device in my home, and the FBI, for whatever reason, wants to suspect me of something, and they contact Amazon and ask Amazon for all the data that Alexa may have collected, because we know that Alexa is always listening, whether Amazon says it's not or it is or not. We know it is. So they contact Amazon for that data, and Amazon provides that to them without a warrant. Very scary. Very, very, very scary to think about. This did go on to pass. The House passed the FISA Section 702. Thomas Massie voted no. The Republicans voted 192 to 22. Democrats 42 to 169. One independent voted for it, so it passed with a total of 235 votes to 191 votes. How is it that so many people are voting for this? First of all, this bill was originally for foreign citizens, or foreign investigations, not to be used on our own citizens. And now we are using it on our own citizens. Again, very scary to think about. And it just goes to show you that both sides are using this. The one side, you would think that Republicans would not be for this, right? Because this originally came through with the Democratic policies. However, Republicans are just going ahead and saying, yes, let's go ahead and keep surveilling our citizens as well. Let's see what they're doing. We don't need warrants. That's extremely scary to think about. Thomas Massie did introduce the H.R. 8470, a Surveillance Accountability Act. It requires a probable cause warrant before the federal government can search your private data. even if that data is held by a third party. Warrantless searches are unconstitutional, and he is absolutely correct. Our Fourth Amendment right guarantees us the right that we would have a warrant before any search and seizures. However, again, the FBI going around and doing searches without a warrant. I did want to go ahead and let you listen to this clip from C-SPAN when him and Representative Bobart were talking about the warrantless searches and the bill that they had introduced for the surveillance accountability legislation.
Hello, thank you for showing up. Today we're introducing a brand new bill that's long needed. Unfortunately, it's needed because there have been so many erosions of our Fourth Amendment right to privacy. You know, there's a robust discussion right now about the FISA 702 program, but really that's just the tip of the iceberg in terms of infringement on the Fourth Amendment. There's so many other laws and Supreme Court decisions that have impinged on your right to privacy. For instance, the Bank Secrecy Act, the Right to Financial Privacy Act, the Patriot Act, all of these have great sounding names, but all of them created so-called loopholes in the Constitution. Foreign Intelligence Surveillance Act, not a euphemism, but misnamed because it's got foreign in it. It's used to go after Americans. Secret applications of the Foreign Intelligence Surveillance Act. I've been in a skiff last week where I saw 2 secret rulings, interpretations of FISA law, of how the government has created additional loopholes to spy on you that I'm not even allowed to tell you. These are classified as top secret. And finally, the third-party doctrine. This is very troublesome. It's been expanded. It was a ruling. It's based on a ruling of the Supreme Court that allowed, it was a 6-3 ruling. I think it was a bad ruling, but it's been expanded in its interpretation to include things like doctor's appointment records, bank records, phone records, who you texted, all the metadata, flock cameras, for instance, now. And if you think about collecting information on bank records, that means you can get your gun records. And this was done. This is not something I've imagined. This is something that I learned about thanks to whistleblowers on the Judiciary Committee. What the DOJ did is they asked Bank of America, and Bank of America complied, for all of the records of anybody who was here inside of a certain radius of Washington, D.C. on January 6th. They asked them for all of their bank purchase records for gun stores as well. It's completely illegal, but imagine instead of doing a query with one person that you turn AI loose on these databases now. There's virtually nothing the government can't know about you without a warrant if you believe that these infringements are legitimate, and they are not. That is why we've created this bill called the Surveillance Accountability Act. This was conceived by Naomi Brockwell of the Ludlow Institute. We've been working on it for years. It's got the right provisions in it so that it doesn't impede legitimate law enforcement activity, and it's long needed. It closes these loopholes that I've explained to you, and more importantly, it creates a private right of action. You know, you can sue state employees of the government, but it's almost impossible to sue federal government employees if they infringe on your constitutional rights. So we put that's the second half of this bill. It gives you the right to sue the government employee. And this is one of the most frustrating things I've run into since I've been in Congress. No accountability. I'll tell you what, we'll have accountability if when somebody goes to work, it's not just fun and games. If they infringe on your rights, on your constitutional rights, they could be privately and personally sued for that. With that, I want to turn over the podium to my friend Naomi Brockwell.
I'm going to stop it there. Think about it. Think about it. Your medical records, your phone call records, your texting records, bank records, your store purchases, he said, all of those things What's to stop them from going after any of that without a warrant? They've got proof that the FBI has done this without a warrant. There are certain things that we should have a guaranteed privacy to. And it's scary to think that we have no privacy at all without a warrant. That's scary. I do like that he's announced this accountability legislation. I do also like the fact that the second half of the bill does allow citizens to sue the government employee who violates our constitutional rights. I will go ahead and spoiler alert, when this bill went to the Senate decided to just basically sit it on a shelf. They never put it to a vote. It's just sitting there. So we will see whether or not they ever put it to a vote. I really hope that they do. I really hope that they listen to Thomas Massie and take this seriously, because the American people should be guaranteed their rights. Okay. The last thing I want to talk about here is this crazy, ridiculous automobile kill switch. Have you heard about this? It's absolutely ridiculous. So let's just watch.
And one of the mandates that's impractical, Orwellian, and needs to go away is this mandate for every automobile made in 2027. Like, we're just a few months away from this, to be able to shut itself off. Every car has to be able to judge your driving and shut down if it thinks you're impaired. And this isn't like the thing that, if you've been convicted of a DUI that you have to blow into to prove that you're not, inebriated. This will judge your driving. I've been fighting this ever since. I've been fighting this for years. I've fought it in the Transportation Committee, which I serve on. I've cross-examined the NHTSA people who are responsible for this. They will admit to me it can't work. It won't work right. I had a woman who testified that there are about 1 billion car trips a day. If the success rate of this technology is 99.9%, that means there's going to be 1 million cars that won't start on any given day. And I pointed out to her, well, it's not the car not starting, because the technology actually stops you mid-trip. So the car's going to, I guess it's going to pull you over. And
on the highway?
On the highway. You could be a mom with kids because you swerved a deer and then you got in the breakdown lane because an ambulance went by. How does the car know? By the way, it's going to have to know what road you're on. The technology they're proposing will watch your face. It'll look for your gaze. It'll look at your pupils. It'll look at your posture. It'll look where your hands are and judge whether you are competent to drive or not. My question that I've asked over and over, I can't get an answer to, is if the AI in the dashboard and the cameras in your dashboard is the judge, the jury, and the executioner, and you get pulled over on the side of the road and you're a mom with a minivan full of kids, how do you appeal your sentence? Who's going to start the car back up? Do you press a button and plead with another AI?
But a machine is watching you on behalf of your overlords in your own car. If the North Koreans did this, we would say this is like classic Stalinist hellscape, right?
Right. I don't even think the Chinese have proposed this yet.
And nobody finds this scary. I'm sorry. I live in Kentucky. Where Thomas Massie's from. Like I said, not in his district. We have potholes in Kentucky. There are a lot of you states have experienced that. So if I swerve to miss a pothole, and then I swerve to miss another pothole, and then, oh my God, I have to swerve to miss a deer or a cat or a dog that jumps out in the middle of the road, whatever, then is it going to stop my car? If I've got kids in my car, what am I supposed to do? Just sit there and try to talk to some machine to tell it that, hey, this is what happened, so please turn my car back on? It doesn't make sense. Like, what? Why does the government get to decide if I'm capable of driving my own car? If you are doing this, this was proposed by Mothers Against Drunk Driving. If you're doing this for drunk driving, cool. There's other ways to do it. Blow into the machine. Have a machine where you blow into, and if you're inebriated, your car's not going to stop. Or, sorry, not going to start. That makes a million times more sense than having the vehicle stop. Who thought of this? Who thought of this? Who thought this was good technology? I have no idea. It makes no sense. But he's right. No one has fought harder than him against the Biden's automobile kill switch. He's rallied on it in transportation committees, rules committees hearings. He's forced 2 recorded votes in the House to repeal it. You can go here and you can see all of the times that he has tried his best to fight so hard against this. Unfortunately, 57 Republicans and 211 Democrats voted in favor of this kill switch. You can go here to this website and view the roll call for the vote that he forced to defund the mandates and see where your congressman voted. Honestly, I can't believe that anybody would want this. I honestly cannot believe it. Why would you want this? It's just another way for the government to surveil you. That's really all it is. Another way for the government to watch what you're doing and see every single thing that you do all day long. Oh, you're going to take your kids to school. Well, let's let the government watch you and your kids while you're going to school on your daily drive to the pit, take your kids to school. Got to go for that Starbucks run? Well, the government's going to watch you go pick up your Starbucks. It's ridiculous.
The member opposed, each will control 5 minutes. The chair recognizes the gentleman from Kentucky.
Mr. Chair, I rise in support of our amendment. This is co-sponsored by Mr. Perry from Pennsylvania and Mr. Roy from Texas. And I regret that we have to offer this amendment. What I'm going to describe will probably sound like a bad science fiction movie, but that's what's written into law. Right now in law, that's going to be implemented it says for 2026 and beyond. Now, the reality is the technology doesn't exist, but that doesn't keep legislators from imagining things that they would like to do to infringe on civil liberties. But there is a law that states that every vehicle manufactured is going to have a kill switch in it. The car itself will monitor your driving. And if the car thinks that you're not doing a good job driving, it will disable itself. So the car dashboard becomes your judge, your jury, and your executioner. Imagine this. We got a snowstorm coming. A mom takes her kids out. They're going to the grocery store. It's snowing. They're trying to get some groceries before the big storm hits. She swerves for a pothole. The neighbor's pet gets in the way, swerves for that. A first responder goes by. She pulls over. Her car says, "You got one more swerve, and then we're going to ground you." There it is. The next thing she has to avoid, an icy patch in the road. The car has adjudicated her as unsuitable for driving. It disables the vehicle, and there she's stranded. My question is, how do you appeal your sentence once your car, the technology in your car, has judged you to be incapable of driving? Once it's disabled you and your children at the side of the road, how do you appeal that? Do you press a button on the dashboard? Do you start talking to an AI? What if it really was somebody who was drunk? Are you really going to send a police car after this? Disabled vehicle? Do we have the resources to do that? There's going to be so many false positives. The technology is unworkable. That's why the DOT is still in the rulemaking process, asking for feedback on how this thing could even exist. And it's just a bad idea, but it's in law, and so our amendment would defund that. And with that, I'd like to reserve the balance of my time.
The gentleman reserves. The gentleman from Kentucky is recognized.
Mr. Chairman, drunk driving is a serious problem, but 31 states already have the technology to keep drunk drivers off of the road with ignition interlock devices that they can mandate. And this technology that's in the law is not going to fix the drunk driving problem. With that, I'd like to yield 2 minutes to my friend from Pennsylvania, Mr. Perry.
The gentleman from Pennsylvania is yielded 2 minutes.
I thank the gentleman for Kentucky for his work on this, and of course, the chairman of the full committee for the hard work on appropriations. Look, none of us want to be on the road with drunk drivers, and of course, this was a solution intended to deal with them. And all of us want them to be dealt with, but I'm going to remind everybody, as my friend from Kentucky just said, there is already legislation in multiple states, dozens of states, that deal with drunk drivers through the ignition interlock system. Probably in your family somewhere, someone you know, you've dealt with this. I know in my family and the people I know, I've dealt with it. But here's what I don't want to see in America. Everybody being punished for the people that drink and drive, including the ones that don't drink and drive. I happen not to drink, but I'm going to be forced to have this thing in my car, and I'm going to tell you what's next. After what Thomas said, after what Representative Massie said, the car is going to be the judge, jury, and sentencer for your crime in the car. The next thing is going to be, well, we need to hook this thing up to the government so we can dispatch the police. I'm just going to tell you what's going to happen next. They're going to be shutting your car off when they decide whatever they decide from wherever they decide it. Ladies and gentlemen, I don't know about what you think about due process and the Constitution and the Fourth Amendment and the right to not be imposed upon by illegal, unlawful search and seizure, but punishing everybody for this crime, whether they've committed it or not, if they're going to commit it or not, should be unconstitutional. This shouldn't really be a question. We all want to get to the problem, and we're
Absolutely agree. Absolutely agree. With this supposed technology, not only is it an invasion of privacy, but you are typically punishing everyone for a few. And it should absolutely be illegal. Why would you implement something that is going to invade everyone's privacy for a few? Granted, that few is a high number, but it's nowhere near the high number of the amount of people who live in the United States. Just saying. With that said, I do just want to close out this and talk about Thomas Massie overall. To me, Thomas Massie is what Trump originally stood for, to make America great again, MAGA. Even though the many Republican leaders and a big part of the MAGA wing are growing frustrated with him because he regularly breaks with the party and with Donald Trump on major votes. I still believe that he is a true, what MAGA should be, right? And the conflict that he has with many Republicans and with Trump itself comes down to his votes against the Republican bills. Sorry. He's a hardline libertarian conservative. He often votes no on spending bills, debt ceiling increases, surveillance programs, military actions, and even Republican-backed compromises if he thinks they are going to increase the government debt. Which he is totally against, and he has said time and time again he is against increasing the national debt. He's also publicly criticized Trump for government spending, for war powers, for foreign policy and executive authority, which Trump then turns around and calls him disloyal and backs his challenger in this primary because of the criticism that he gets. Thomas Massie is he's more ideological than party-based. He's a big complaint, I will say, that a lot of Republicans have with Thomas Massie is that he prioritizes his ideology over what is best for the Republican Party. Even a lot of conservatives who agree with him on the debt they'll argue that he undermines the Republican Party itself by refusing to compromise on votes. Some GOP voters do admire him, though, for his consistency. I am one that admires him for his consistency. I also admire him for standing up for his beliefs. Don't we want more people in office who go there and stand up for what they believe in, who vote for what they tell us they're going to vote for? If you tell me that you're going to vote no on everything that's going to increase the debt, you want to lower that debt, and so if something's going to increase the national debt, you're going to vote no on it, and that's what you're telling me, and then you turn around and you vote yes to sending all this foreign money, why on earth did I vote yes why did I vote for you? It makes no sense. So I would much rather have someone like Thomas Massie in office who stands on his principles than to have somebody who votes strictly for the party. Another big thing, and probably one of the biggest things as of late, that has turned a lot of Republicans against him, is foreign policy disagreements. He has taken a more non-interventionist positions than much of the GOP establishment. He's criticized the U.S. military involvement overseas and questioned support for some foreign allies, which has brought backlash from a lot of Republicans and pro-Israeli groups. So, again, he does it because of his beliefs, though, and his policies. He really believes in not raising the national debt, not sending foreign aid, not being involved in foreign wars. Like, these are all things that he stands for over and over. And I would much, much rather have someone who stands on their beliefs than someone who's going to vote with the party. That's just my thoughts and opinions. You can describe Massie as unusually consistent compared with most politicians. He's polarizing, absolutely. Absolutely polarizing, because he does not vote with the party. But he has principles, and he stands on his principles. And he's consistent with those principles. His principles have not changed since he got in office. And I would much rather have 100 more Thomas Massies in office than the majority of the ones that are already in office. Or even one more Galarian. That's just my thoughts, my opinions. And that's where I'm going to end it there. Remember, go out and vote on Tuesday if you are in Kentucky. And I hope you guys all have a wonderful day. Please like and subscribe and leave your comments below. Thank you so much. I'll see you next time. Bye.